Welcome to Lecture 1.2 for AP World History. This lecture is going to really focus on the Neolithic Revolution. Key Concept 1.2 is all about the Neolithic Revolution in early agricultural settlements. Roman numeral I says that beginning about 10,000 years ago, the Neolithic Revolution led to the development of new and more complex economic and social systems. So really what they want you to know for Key Concept 1.2 is the new economic systems, and then of course the social systems that came from those new economic. So when we're looking at the agricultural Neolithic Revolution, we have to talk about the two different terms. The term agricultural revolution is misleading because it denotes that it was just agriculture, that we just started farming. Historians don't really like to just use that term to describe this time period and this transition. Neolithic is really about a transitioning into a new time period. So this is a little bit of periodization for you. You can discuss how, yes, we started farming, but when you are talking about the Neolithic Revolution, we're discussing the changes that came along with that new farming technique. The farming technology is going to change a huge amount of things about our lives as human beings, and so the Neolithic Revolution term is a little bit more all-encompassing when we're talking about a period change. So this is a little lesson on periodization. The type of agriculture that developed was called systematic or swidden agriculture. Basically, swidden agriculture is slash and burn. So the idea was, how did we all of a sudden decide that, hey, if we start burning this land and plant some stuff, then we get food from it? A lot of people have different theories on this. Some people feel that hunter-gatherers wandered back to the same areas over and over again, associated with the seasons and with the herds and all that kind of stuff. And they noticed that, in their trash piles, things were growing, or that when they came back to a certain area, it was the same as it renewed itself. And then they started to systematically create agriculture as a result of that, because it created a more steady food supply. The purpose of one of the first things that you have to do in order to develop any type of farming system is you got to clear the land. Like I said, they're going to use slash and burn technology for that. The second thing that's going to happen with the Neolithic Revolution is domestication. Human beings cannot physically do all of the work that's necessary for farming. Dogs are going to be one of the first domesticated animals, but that actually dates back to hunting and gathering. Obviously, the loyalty of the dog and the hunting skills of the dogs are super important to hunting, gathering lifestyles. However, when we start farming, we're also going to start doing what's called selective breeding. So we decide that we take, our best bull and our best cow to create a super cow. And out of that selective breeding, we're going to create animals that are suited to our needs. So if we wanted a more docile cow, or if we wanted a horse that we could control better, then we're going to take personality types of different animals and breed them with other personality types so that we can get what we want out of it. In the Americas, they don't really do this. There's not really a lot of domesticated animals in the Americas for our early people, simply because a lot of the animals in these areas are difficult to domesticate. If you want to figure out how to domesticate a panther, more power to you, but it's going to be difficult. So the idea is trying to find some type of docile animal to domesticate, and the only thing that they could really do is the llamas. And the llamas were only domesticated really in the Peruvian areas. So people like the Mexica or the Mayans really did not domesticate animals. Some people argue that that's what delayed the development of the Native American groups, that delayed the civilizing, for lack of a better word, aspects of the Americas, is because of their lack of animals that they could domesticate. Remember that things like horses, pigs, and a lot of cows, and a lot of those animals actually come to the Americas with the Spanish. They do not originate here. As a result of this, we have a surplus of food. We don't need to move anymore, and so we develop into villages, and we start living in some type of village system. Key concept IA states that possibly as a response to climatic change, permanent agricultural villages emerged first in the lands of the Eastern Mediterranean. So basically, what the College Board wants you to be able to recognize is the fact that there was some type of environmental change, some type of climate change that could have led humans to settle, and where we settled was in the Eastern. The Plasticine Epoch was about 2 million years ago, which is basically the way that the Earth has been set up is we have these long periods of glaciations where everything's super cold. So obviously things like the Ice Age and all that kind of stuff. And then we go through these short interglaciation periods where things thaw out. When things thaw out and the average temperature of the world goes up, that means that we have more arable land. We have land that we can actually farm. It's not as frozen. And the idea is that the Neolithic Revolution happened as a result of an interglaciation period. Homo sapiens humans appeared during a warm period about 120,000 to 100,000 years ago. And the idea of that is that, and we call this time period the Plasticine Epoch. So the idea is that Homo sapiens are going to survive and become Homo sapiens sapiens through the next interglaciation period, or into the next long glaciation period, which we have called the Ice Age. The technical term for the Ice Age is the Wisconsin glaciation. Somehow, humans managed to survive what we've called the Ice Age. So you can think back to Ice Age, the movies. This is actually pretty accurate. There was this warming period that led to the development of Homo sapiens, and then this massive Ice Age called the Wisconsin glaciation that we somehow managed to survive. What we end up with is an interglaciation period called the Holocene. And this is where in the Ice Age movies, you would actually be seeing Ice Age the meltdown, when the Earth started to unfreeze and we started to be able to have more land to farm. And that was about 18,000 years ago. It was a long warming period of 6,000 years. And in that 6,000 years is where human beings are going to create the Stone Age that leads into the Neolithic Revolution. Here you can see migration patterns as during the Holocene Epoch. So you can see where we develop into civilizations around a lot of our river valleys, and as a result of that we start to migrate out. Why do we start to migrate? Well, the land was warmer. We were able to increase our populations. And as a result of human beings increasing our population, we're going to see less resources available to us because we are putting a strain on the natural resources that are available in a certain area. There's less animals, there's less water, all that kind of stuff. So as a result, we start to move. And as we start to move, we end up creating new civilizations throughout the world. And obviously, that's what the whole purpose of this course is. Part IB is that pastoralism developed at various sites in the grasslands of Afro-Eurasia. Pastoralism is a different economic system. So our first economic system is hunting and gathering. Any type of economic system is how do we meet our basic needs? How do we get food, water, shelter? Okay? Our first one is hunting, gathering. Our second one is farming, the Neolithic Revolution. At the same time as the Neolithic Revolution is happening, we have a new economic system developing called pastoralism. Pastoralism is where you are meeting your basic needs by herding domesticated animals. So it makes sense that pastoralism and Neolithic farming are developing at the same time, because we are domesticating animals not only for village life, but we're also starting to domesticate animals for the pastoral life. There is a theory that the first agriculturalists were actually pastoralists, and that we domesticated animals first and then farmed. There's theories that they developed separately, independent, and they have nothing to do with each other. Judaism is actually a religion that was started by a pastoralist people. Abraham and his family were pastoralists, which is part of the reason why Judaism is going to spread throughout the region, is because they were moving. Keep that in mind as we go through the development of religion within the next unit. Part C states that different crops or animals were domesticated in various core regions, depending on available local flora and fauna. Here's a little map of what was domesticated and what was being grown where. The AP has been known to ask a couple multiple choice questions about who grew what. Like I said, you can see in the Americas it's very limited in regards to what was domesticated. Obviously we have corn, we have potatoes, we have the turkey, and that's just about it. Within the other hemisphere, within our eastern hemisphere, we have the domestication of some of our major animals like horses and pigs are going to be important. Goats and chickens and cattle are going to be very, very important to our diets as we develop new proteins and as we develop the need for milk products as well. Milk is also a huge source of protein for the ancient world. And you can see that Africa not domesticating things within this first time period. We will not talk about Africa as a settled civilization for a while because they don't domesticate the animals there, and that impacts their development as large cities and as large settlements. You can see this is another map that gives you some more crops on what was being domesticated where. You can see some of the important crops that have huge impact on the world today. So, grapes within the Mediterranean is going to be very, very important. Barley and wheat is going to be hugely important for the Middle East, as well as the development of this thing called beer and ale. It's not safe to drink the water. Water can kill you, and the understanding of boiling water and getting rid of things in water is not there. But they did know that if you created some type of alcohol in that fermentation process, will clean the water so that you can obviously stay hydrated. You can see a huge amount of the different products that come from what we call the New World, from the Western Hemisphere, that are completely different from what was being domesticated in the Eastern Hemisphere. Part D states that agricultural communities had to work cooperatively to clear land and to create the water control systems for needed crop production. This is one of the reasons why we have the development of politics. Organizing these people into agricultural communities, understanding things like gravity movement for irrigation systems, and being able to engineer those things kind of put you at the top of the social scale and what will ultimately become the political scale as well. Like I said, they used slash and burn agriculture and systematic split-in agriculture when they first started clearing land. Here's an example of an ancient irrigation system. You can see the understanding of gravity is limited at this point. It's nothing compared to what the Romans are going to be able to do with the aqueducts, but the development is there. This is actually in India. This irrigation system was found near Mohenjo-daro. So they're using rocks. Remember, we don't have advanced tools in order to move and control water. Part E. These agricultural practices drastically impacted environmental diversity. Pastoralists also affected the environment by grazing large numbers of animals on fragile grasslands, leading to erosion when overgrazed. Obviously, we are going to have a huge impact on the environment when we start to develop systems of agriculture, and we're making huge changes to animal populations through domestication as well. This is where during hunting and gathering, humans had limited impact on the environment. These villages will ultimately turn into cities within the next time period, and of course that will also continue to impact the environment on a large scale. Roman numeral 2 for key concept 1.2 states that agriculture and pastoralism began to transform human societies. Part A, pastoralism and agriculture led to more reliable and abundant food supplies, which increased the population. When you increase your population, you're going to have a more stratified society. Here you can see some of the changes for our population numbers. Now, if you notice, when we hit the Neolithic Revolution, we have a huge jump in our populations. We see a massive amount of people managing to survive, and we're seeing people who are not necessarily living longer, but we are seeing more babies being born, and we're seeing an increase in our population overall. Part B, surpluses of food and other goods led to specialization of labor, including new classes of artisans and warriors and the development of elites. And Part D, both pastoralist and agrarian societies, elite groups accumulated wealth. Wealth at this point could be something as simple as the most cattle, or owning the most land. Wealth does not necessarily mean money at this point. Creating more hierarchical and social structures and promoting patriarchal forms of social organization. So socially, we end up with gender roles, and we end up with what's called patriarchy. Women were pregnant more often, which does limit women's ability to contribute economically, and so therefore that's going to lower their social status, and they are going to end up with gender roles. So we end up with very specific gender roles throughout the development of farming and the development of village life. We also end up with a very complex class system. The idea of wealth is something new. The idea that somebody could own more than another person is a new idea that resulted from the Neolithic Revolution. And keep in mind that the Neolithic Revolution is thousands of years. It's not 50 years or one generation. We're talking that these changes took place over thousands of years and evolved very slowly. You get specialized labor classes. Obviously, you are eventually going to want to protect your supplies, and that will create a warrior class. And control of that warrior class will change politics. And then, of course, you have your artisans. Things like pottery makers, textiles are going to be super important in regards to an artistic or an artisan field as well. And as a result, you get political elites. The first word we have for kind of a king is Lugal. Lugal means kind of big man, and it was found in Mesopotamian literature, and that is really the first time we see a concept of someone being in charge. Now, it also makes sense that a lot of your elites are going to be associated with religion super early on. Remember, these people are pretty much animist. They believe that the gods impact weather, and they believe that the gods impact climate. And so it would make sense that their elites are going to be associated with religion, and that the gods communicated with the citizens of a different area through natural forces, earthquakes, hurricanes, whatever, floods. And all of that can impact the political leader that's in charge. Part C, technological innovations led to improvements in agricultural production. Some specific technology you need to know about is trade and transportation. We need to look at pottery, plowing, textiles, metals, wheels, of course, and wheel vehicles. So the wheel is going to aid in long-distance trade, and what that's going to be able to do is to allow different villages to specialize in certain products. And when you specialize in a certain product, you become good at making that product or growing that food, and that's going to create a little bit of long-distance trade. Now, long-distance, we're talking within Mesopotamia. We're not talking about across deserts or mountains or anything like that yet. Obviously, we will start to develop things like chariots. Chariots become a symbol of wealth and of prestige. We'll look at boats. We're not crossing oceans yet. We're going up and down rivers at this point for some long-distance trade, and for, certain things grow in certain areas better and trade because of that. The use of pack animals for trade. Donkeys are going to be bred in specific to be pack animals, and then of course you have the llamas over here in the Americas. The development of the harness. Now, this is a very primitive harness. One of the biggest problems they had with riding something like a horse is not choking them, and so it takes a long time to figure out a way to have a harness on animals that does not hurt the animal necessarily, and keeps the animal alive. These animals are economic investments, just like your vehicle is today, and so they wanted to make sure to maintain that economic investment, and it was difficult to do that with the technology that was available. Pottery, of course, pottery is going to develop because of the need for storage of food. Pottery will also become an art form as we go into our next time period as well. And we use pottery to date a lot of the villages. Pottery is long-lasting. It's a hugely important archaeological tool for historians as we try to date things and figure out what happened. Pottery also shows signs of struggle, so if we see shards of pottery with burns on it, we can date it and figure out when the city got attacked by whomever. So pottery is really important as an archaeological tool. And of course it was traded long distance. We have seen pieces of pottery in India that were produced in Mesopotamia. Ploughs, obviously the use of the harnesses on the pack animals, large animals like oxen, are going to make farming more systematic and more productive and more efficient. And as we get more productive and more efficient farming, we end up with even more specialized jobs, and we end up with more population, which makes society even more complex. Woven textiles is a specialized job as well. Textiles, just as it does today, denotes class level. What you can afford denotes your class level, and that is nothing. That is something that has continued since woven textiles became an artisanal job back in the Neolithic Revolution.